What's up, guys? So we're back, and we get a lot of questions about the projects, but particularly we've been getting a lot about the Raider lately.
Yeah, so we decided to put it out to you guys. We've been posting on the Facebook groups, we've been posting on our other social channels to get some of the questions you guys want answers to.
All right, so let's jump into the questions. So the first one we got was from Colin, and he asked, where can I get parts for my Raider?
Yeah, so Colin Fenderbender45 on Instagram, he asked this question, and it probably gets asked more in our groups than any other question that comes up. Unfortunately, the Raider was such a limited market, basically 3 years of production. There is no real aftermarket for Raiders. Guys have a hard time finding headlight assemblies, taillight assemblies, so any aftermarket thing is really, really difficult to come by. But what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to check out Dakota aftermarket stuff, body lifts, suspensions, any performance parts, things like that. Almost mirrors exactly the Dakota under the body. Start there. There's a couple guys on the Raider groups that are really good for information. Mike, I think Sodney's one of them. John Sheldon's another. Check those guys out on the Raider groups, and they are a wealth of knowledge for this stuff.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's one of the things that makes the Raider so cool is people never see them. But the downside of that is you just can't get parts because there's no aftermarket since it's such a small production vehicle.
Yeah, if you're one of the guys watching this or one of the guys that gave us some feedback that actually have a Raider, you know how exciting it is to come across one. It's just like that with any of our other projects, really. You know, you see a Mark III in town, you're freaking out, right?
Yeah, it's not very often.
So
the next one we got was from Arturo, and he asked, what's the suspension setup?
this is probably the number one question on the Raider, I would say.
Definitely.
So it's king coilovers in the front, triple bypass reservoir shocks next to it, and then we've got triple bypass resi shocks in the back. Those are 3-inch. Those are massive. But what they did is, so the front is caged all the way to the back, and they dumped the engine cage right on top of the original coil bucket, if you will. It's kind of like the strut setup where the coil sits over the shock and mounts in with 3 bolts like you would see in some of the unibody cars, import cars.
And they had to do that because of the classing, right?
Yeah, so basically what they did is they dumped the engine cage right on top of that coil bucket, and then they welded in plates to attach the coilover. And so the coilover sits inside the factory bucket, and like Ryan was saying, is for the stock mini class rules, you have to use the original suspension components and mounting locations or factory like. So on the front, it's the factory upper arm, factory lower arm with manufactured attachment points or mounting points for the coilovers. On the back, it's got Deaver long travel leafs, which is killer. You can see in some of the videos, it really droops out and makes a big difference. And then they fabricated mounts on the bottom side of the axle, and then fabricated into the cage some top mounts for those bypass shocks. So the back setup is really cool. Hopefully we have some more to come on adjusting that setup a little bit for a little extra travel.
So next question we got was from our buddy Chris, who, thanks for all the support, Chris. You're always on there hyping us up, and we love the fact that you got a BoostRodeo sticker on your Raider. He's saying, I need some tips on trimming the rear bumper. I think it's time to let the old fader bumper go. So that's something we recently just did.
Yeah, Christian's always on our stuff, always making comments. Big shout out to you, man. Thanks, we appreciate it. So he's been following along. We removed the rear bumper last year, I think.
Yeah.
Basically, we kept hitting it on the ground. When I got the truck, it was all bent and rusted. Removing it really changed the look of the back of the truck. So we'd love to help you with that. You've recently seen where we've trimmed the back fenders now because I keep hitting the fenders on the ground. So now the bed sides are trimmed up with that pre-runner style. I think I'm going to redo it a little bit. You can see here how the angle is pretty sharp down to the tire. And I think I'm going to move it up a little bit and change that angle. But that's a big one on the back that really changes the look of the truck. I think something that Christian really liked too is when we pulled the front bumper off. So in my mind, now I got to redo it, and I know there's a couple of you out there that are wanting to do front bumpers. One of the guys already has his off, which is really cool. So the problem with the way the two bumpers set up is it's pushed way out past the truck to go around that factory bumper. Mm-hmm. So what we're going to do is we're going to have to suck that in to give it more of a cleaner look and change up the skid plate.
Yep. We didn't shoot anything when we trimmed it the very first time, but like Josh said, we're probably going to go back and adjust that angle a little bit. So we'll probably do a tutorial on where we trimmed it and why, and kind of show you guys the angles. And we do plan on putting a new rear tube bumper on it that sits quite a bit higher just to give it something back there to protect it.
Yeah, right now you have the spare tire rack hanging off that's essentially acting as a bumper, so we really need to tie something in that brings it all together.
So again from Chris, he said that he got his Raider stuck the other day in the juniper dunes. Luckily he was able to get it out. It took him about 10 minutes. But he wanted to know more about our tire racks and the traction boards that we have on the truck. They're a lifesaver.
Huge. Go buy them. There's the US made ones from Action Tracks. Action Tracks does sponsor Fire Guys Racing, so we want to make sure to give them a shout out. We had this thing buried halfway up the frame rail, axle in the ground, tires essentially free spinning, and with a little bit of moving of the sand, wedge them underneath the paddle tires and literally just back over them. They suck in under the tires, lift up the truck, and you pull right out.
It took us all of 2 minutes to get the truck from being on its belly on the frame rails and sand to out.
Yeah, we used them 4 or 5 times.
Yeah.
In the sand dunes, whether it was the Razor, the truck, multiple times, multiple drivers. They weren't all me, I promise.
Yeah, that's definitely the most we've ever needed them. We usually only need them a handful of times a year, and they still pay for themselves just because it beats the hell out of digging out.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
About the tire rack, so that whole rear chassis part in the bed cage and tire rack, light racks, all of that is all custom fabricated by the original builders of the truck. So the idea is to even out the weight in the back of the truck and move some of the weight beyond the rear axle so that it'll ride better through the nasty stuff. The light package on top, obviously you can see the 2 chase lights that face rearward that were class rules, and really any sanctioned racing rules require that dust light facing rearward. And then you have the overhead light bar, which contains 4 of the Vision X HIDs. That is all custom built. You can buy the lights, but unfortunately in this case you're going to have to build the mount for it. So.
Yeah, I'm sure you could probably find a universal light bar setup for the actual top piece that mounts those. But you're going to have something to tie it into. So you're going to at minimum have to put like an old style roll cage that just comes down at the front of the bed, you know, like the roll bar. Or do a full custom setup like ours that's front to back.
And the way it works is it's kind of like a sleeve. So you have a post sticking up off of the cage and then a sleeve that slides over that you just pin in place, and then it acts like it's self-ground. So it works out great.
Yeah, and that makes it really easy to stash that light bar so we can take it off whenever we want to. So you'll see the truck a lot of times where we don't have that up when we don't need it. Yeah,
I don't run it in the daytime. Those lights are pretty expensive, and if this thing accidentally ends up on its lid, it's one less thing I got to replace.
Right.
So Wizardman North had the same question about the name and brands for the tire rack and lights. So again, Vision X lighting is who's on there. Everything's custom made. One of the really slick things though that hopefully you can see and pick up in some of the videos is they had made custom jack plates. So it's like a sand plate instead of wheels on the bottom of the jack, and it's obviously a quick up and down jack. And then it slides in and locks into place into the bed cage.
Yeah.
So it stores the
handle?
The handle, thank you.
Yeah, that thing comes in super handy. Like, I don't think we've ever had to use it in the field or when we're out racing, but we just use it for tire changes and whatever when the truck's there. Like, it's super handy.
We use it for everything. When we put the paddles on, you know, we've got a battery-powered impact. So while I'm jacking up the truck, Ryan's taking off the tires, and by the time the tires are going back on, we're lowering the truck, and it takes no time at all.
Right. I think more times than not, it's not even us that needs it. It's we're at the track and somebody else like breaks a lug nut or loses a wheel or needs to jack their car up and fix something. And we're like, oh yeah, we got a jack, and we just pull it off the truck. So we end up bailing a lot of other people out.
So true. It's happened many, many times. Yeah.
So the next question we got is from our buddy Joe. He's Piston Soup on Instagram. Dude drives the hell out of a rad little boosted Miata like nobody's business. He says, what's your favorite moment with the truck? And I think we have a lot of them, so it's kind of tough.
This is a question that comes up just in different times, not necessarily in this way. So Joe, thank you for asking. You know how much the truck means to me, and I'll get into that in a second. But you know, favorite moments I have with the truck is I have a challenge coin from my uncle right on the dash that I see every time I get in there, which means a lot to me. Also, my kids absolutely adore the truck. I think pretty much anyone that sees the truck likes it, but the kids just, Ryan's kids, my kids, doesn't matter where you are. They just love the thing. It's like a big play gym, really, and then they get to go for rides and jump it. So that's probably a big moment for me. The biggest moment that I had with this truck is literally the day I picked it up. I drove past the site where my uncle passed away and took pictures with the memorial that was placed at the location of his wreck with the truck, and the sun was setting and the light was killer, and all the fire guys had been putting shirts in the fence line, and so there was, I can't remember how many at the time, but it was over 100 shirts lining this barbed wire fence from different fire departments and from around the state of California that were there to honor my uncle, which brings me to how I got the truck and why it's so important to me and so close to my heart, my family's heart, is my uncle was a firefighter. He was killed in the line of duty in his command rig driving back from a fire. So it was a very tragic incident for my family, obviously. For his wife and kids, can't imagine what that's like. And so at his memorial, my aunt actually offered me his truck, and I didn't understand what she was saying. So I thought she meant his daily driver, right? And so we're in San Diego, California, and she says, when can you pick it up? And she was talking about the Raider. So for those that don't know, the Raider that's in my possession won the Baja 1000 stock mini in 06, finished third in 07. The guys with Dan Fresh that built it and with Mitsubishi ended up retiring it in 08, and that's when it came to my family. I actually drove up and picked it up from Orange County.
Yeah, I was going to say you were the original one that grabbed that truck for Gary.
Yeah, and I'd been to Mexico with my uncle just one time racing stock Volkswagens, which was an awesome time, absolute great experience. And so he was living in Colorado and asked me to pick it up for him when he sent the money over to buy it. And so Dan and team, and I think it was Sean Douglas that brought it with him, loaded it off their trailer and loaded it onto one that I borrowed from a buddy, and we stored it in my apartment garage. I had a townhouse for a few months until my uncle was able to come get the truck. So the fire guys racing know a lot more about the truck than I do. Obviously the guys that built it know a lot, but they stay in touch all the time with us, and we really enjoy representing them and doing stuff we love to do.
Yeah, I think one of the coolest things is how many of the guys on the original Mitsubishi racing team that ran that truck at Baja have reached out to us and just been ecstatic to see that the truck's still around and in one piece and it's not wrecked, and just knowing that it's still out there. I think that's been really cool because they've been super helpful on filling us in on the history or what was put into it, or just cool little facts about the truck over the years.
Yeah, recently I was going through some old text messages, and I can't remember if it was with Sean or if it was with Scott, but there's cameras all over the truck, right? Facing out, facing the driver, facing from behind, under the suspension. And I have the hard drive that stored all that footage, but I can't get into it. And so one of the guys, like I said, I can't remember if it's Sean or Scott, but said, this is how that was written, so find somebody that can read this code. And so I haven't done it yet, but I'm really pumped to try to do that.
So Paul, who is actually on the Fire Guys race team, he's flipping us shit in this question and asking us when we're going to fix the four-wheel drive.
I think in every post I make on this thing, whether it's Instagram...
Doesn't matter if it's a cool post or a bad one and you're like washing it in the driveway, he's like, is four-wheel drive fixed?
Somebody on the team always asks about. So the four-wheel drive hasn't been working since I got it. We found some receipts with the truck and the electronic actuator that goes onto the transfer case that actually does the shifting in there new with receipts from Mexico. So we assumed that that's what broke. We replaced it, didn't fix the problem, tested the old one, worked fine.
Yep.
So we've been replacing the speed sensors because that's one of the error codes that I'm getting on the check engine light, right? We've replaced the inexpensive ones. It's the $80 to $100 ones on the front end that I'd rather spend $200 on something else on the truck.
Yeah, I mean, pre-runners don't have four-wheel drive, Paul.
Just saying, Paul.
It's a pre-runner now.
We haven't been stuck enough to need four-wheel drive yet.
Yeah. So next question is Chris Workman. He says, does it have a full skid plate? And if so, is there any way to order one that fits my 07 LS?
Chris, I appreciate the question. Skid plate, from what you can see in all the pictures, goes back almost all the way to the front axle. Mm-hmm. There's a second skid plate that's pretty well beat up that goes under the transmission and transfer case that I haven't reinstalled yet. I haven't really planned on sending it that hard that I'm going to need that. Unfortunately, to answer your question, again, all custom made. Basically, you have some tubing and some stock cross members that they mount to. So you're kind of on your own buying some plate aluminum and drilling some holes and finding somewhere to mount it up.
So Scott Henson, who was actually one of the original crew members in Baja, he's asking if we are still running the original drivetrain and if there's been any major work.
Scott, I love this question. I think it's you in one of the videos from '07, if I'm not mistaken, that said that this truck was so bulletproof that you put it through Baja and then drove it back to Ensenada, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's you. Anyways, factory drivetrain, 3.7, stock transmission, everything, stock transfer case. I've not changed anything. I will tell you, I brag to everyone that will listen that I have air conditioning in my pre-runner. That recently stopped working. I've gone through a couple relays and I think I need a compressor. But other than that, it's all original, same thing you guys were running. Thanks for the question.
Yeah, and so there's a couple there's like a spare tranny and some things with it, but as far as we can tell, it's the original one that's still in the truck, right?
Yeah, from what I can tell, you're right. There's a spare transmission, there's a spare torque converter, everything's sealed. So I don't know if anything was changed. Scott, maybe you know. And those parts were rebuilt and resealed. But other than that, I think it's what you guys were running in '07.
So I think the only exception to that is if you watch one of our previous videos, we completely grenaded the rear end in this thing right away when we got it.
Yeah, that was, I found out later that my uncle was preparing to sell the truck when he passed away. And I should have known when I picked it up there was a drip pan under the rear end, but there was no oil in it, no fluid in it. Checked all the other fluids, but did not check the rear end. Threw my son in the front seat, and we made it about a mile before we seized it. I'll tell you though, seizing it at 40 miles an hour on ice,
It's fun.
not the safest thing in the world.
So Joshua Williams, he asked, were we on the original Baja team? And we wish we were.
Absolutely wish we were. All the guys we've talked to from the original team have been great, like Ryan alluded to. But unfortunately, the answer is no. I was there in '06 with my uncle when this won the stock mini class, which is cool. I don't really remember it. We were in an 11 car, so we were much later in the day. But no, Dan Fresh, OC Dan Fresh on Instagram. I believe his company was called DXR at the time.
Yep.
They built it with support from Mitsubishi. Scott Henson, that Alfa Romeo guy on Instagram, was part of the team, and Sean Douglas, Mr. Alien 42 on Instagram, have both been tremendous help with putting the pieces together on this. If you look on YouTube, on our channel, we have a history of the truck. There's also 2 other channels that post a 2006 and 2007 recap video. I believe that was Mitsubishi marketing stuff. They used the cameras from the car. You can see more history on the original team there.
So Tom Lewis says he'd like to see pictures of the suspension designs because he wants to get some ideas for his. So we'll show you.
So that's perfect. We can cut right there. Like I mentioned earlier, the suspension designs are pretty much stock. How to use a stock location, stock upper arm, stock lower arm, stock mounting locations for the leaf springs. It is running Deaver long travels, which is really cool. But if you're looking for some ideas, look up Charlie Lewis on Facebook. His truck's called Bro Coda. He also has an Instagram page where he has lots of pictures of that truck. He did a custom built long travel front end with 4-wheel drive still intact. Full custom built bed for kind of overland type stuff with a longer travel rear suspension.
Yeah, that thing was nuts.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's
crazy.
wide too. It's super wide.
Mm-hmm.
And he's running the 3rd gen fiberglass,
Nice.
which looks really cool.
Yeah. Glasses on our wish list.
Oh man, we're gonna have to custom make that
Someday.
someday.
So Toby just had more of a comment. He said this truck outperformed and finished the Baja faster than the Raptor, which all the Ford guys were bragging about, and then it drove home. The drove home piece is definitely accurate from what we can tell.
Yeah, from what I could gather is it definitely made it back to Ensenada, but it was trailered back to the States. So they did the Ensenada to La Paz, and then La Paz back on highway to Ensenada.
Mm-hmm.
In '06 and '07, I could not find any information. I asked the original team members. Thanks, Sean. Thanks, Scott. There was not a Raptor in those years. So
No, 2010 was the first with the new. It was
Right.
a year after they changed body styles in '09, and then
right. So they raced a prototype in '08. I was able to find that
Okay.
information. So there was a prototype in '08. I checked the stock full-size class, and I also checked Class 8, which is a full-size 2-wheel drive class. There was some F-150s in both classes, both years, and I believe the Raider beat the Class 8 trucks, which are 2-wheel drive, but did not beat the stock full trucks, which were able to be 4-wheel drive.
Okay.
Obviously V8, so
Yeah.
a little bit faster.
So David says, this is the first time I've ever seen this, so maybe do a complete story on it from day one to current.
David, thanks for checking out the truck. Thanks for checking out our channel on social and obviously on YouTube. We were kind of hoping this would serve as a walk-around video. We do have some footage of a walk-around video, but let us know if we missed anything on this or there's something specific you want to see. Post a comment below, and we'll get back to you on that.
Doc Hemi and Wizardman North both asked about the drivetrain. Let's just say it's a beast, right?
Not so much. So, yeah, thanks for asking, guys. To meet the stock mini class rules for technically a mid-size truck, which the Dakota and Raider are classified as, and later Tacomas, it had to have the V6 option, not the V8 option. So this is the 3.7 V6 pre-Pentastar, clearly. So that stock 3.7 V6 that Chrysler put out makes 210 horsepower, 235 foot-pounds of torque, which is not tearing up the streets by any means, especially with all the added roll cage and weight that the truck carries around, the 35s, 2 spares, 35 gallons of fuel, I think is what it holds. So you start adding weight pretty quickly and eat up that 210 horsepower.
But it's got a K&N filter.
It does have K&N filter and MagnaFlow mufflers.
Yeah.
Stock tranny, 4-speed auto, stock transfer case, selectable high-low gear ratios. Rear end is 456.
Yeah.
We found that out when we grenaded the rear end, which is a huge help with 35s, but I'll tell you, in the sand, not so much big help. It could be like 510s or something, 512s, whatever the hell they are.
Yeah.
But it was built in Anaheim and has a Motive gear set in it, and then it has a Detroit locker in it as well. So full-time locker, which is fun to irritate people around town. Wizardman North also added some questions about the interior details and the name brands. So essentially the dash is stock, door panels are custom made, center console is custom made with all the autometer gauges. We've got Mastercraft 3G seats in it that are well past expired for what you can legally race in.
Yeah.
Mastercraft harnesses, which are also well past their time, but they work. Safer than a regular seatbelt, I guess. But other than that, the dash and everything is stock. So add roll cage, drive fast.
Pretty much. Lance asks, could you guys film the underside? I'd love to see the drive shaft, even if it's stock, and how the shocks are mounted and the leaf spring and diff.
Lance, thanks for that question. You know, we were going through some of our footage and thought we had this shot, and we didn't, so we shot this just for you. You can see that there's custom hanger brackets that were welded to the rear end for the shocks to mount underneath the rear end. And then there's also custom-built hoops on top of the frame that come up off the frame rail and then tie into some C-channel that allows that reservoir shock to mount up top right underneath the bed.
All right, guys, so that's it for questions. Thank you to everybody who submitted one or has shown interest in the truck. If there's anything we didn't cover that you want to know, let us know. We'd love to make more videos on it.
Thanks for all the support as always. These things mean a lot to us.
Catch you guys in the next one.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Fucking roll cage, goddamn it, race car. Well, I told my wife 20 minutes.
It's an hour. She should have known.
Free spinning. I think the roof is coming down.
Dad life. So Tom Lewis, he asks, he says, he doesn't ask, he says I like.
He doesn't do shit.
He doesn't do shit. He wants to see things.
God damn it.
Too many beers.